Some historians believe that people first emerged from the mountains of Armenia, making it one of the oldest places in human history. The history of the Armenian people is full of amazing stories of survival and glory. They began as a mighty ancient kingdom that garnered respect from even Babylon. However, they did not remain powerful forever, and soon Armenian history was full of stories of conquerors and foreign empires who laid horrors of persecution and genocide on the people. However, Armenia still developed a strong and independent identity, which has carried them through the tragedies of their past. The history of Armenia is tragic because so much of it is filled with the struggle to survive. Yet even through their tragedy, the Armenian people show us that where there is still life, there is still hope for a better tomorrow. Where did Armenia begin? People have lived in Armenia for thousands of years. The oldest shoe found dates from around 3500 BCE and was discovered in a cave complex in Armenia. We don't know much about these ancient people, although they did keep sheep. The Hayasa-Azzi Confederation was around in the 14th century and became one of the most powerful ancient kingdoms of its time. Even Egypt respected them. Pharaoh Thutmose III never conquered it and even wrote about how beautiful it was. By 1190 BCE, the Hayasa-Azzi kingdom faded away, leaving many tribes in Armenia who formed a confederation called the Nairi. Even though the tribes were not officially united, they still worked together as a formidable power that controlled the area for several hundred years. However, the Nairi soon had to face the Assyrian Empire, known throughout the ancient world as nearly unbeatable. Even the powers of Jerusalem and Egypt could not stand against the Assyrians, so it seemed unlikely that the Nairi would even have a chance. But even in their ancient history, the Armenian people were resilient. They banded together under King Arami to form the Kingdom of Urartu in 858 BCE. King Arami was an impressive leader, and he helped the tribes join together to stand up against the Assyrians, keeping Armenia free from Assyrian rule for centuries. The next king of Urartu was Sarduri I. He moved the capital to Tushpa in 830 BCE after the Assyrians took the former capital. For the most part, Sarduri's defenses successfully kept out the Assyrians, making his little kingdom increasingly famous. In 828 BCE, Ishpuini came to the throne and began growing Urartu because the realm was now secure enough from Assyrian attacks to concentrate on their own conquests. Ishpuini was not foolish enough to attack the Assyrians, though. Instead, he conquered Musasir, a city that was possibly in modern Iran. King Ishpuini made the city the kingdom's religious center, and he kept kingdom records in the Urartian language. Until the 8th century BCE, the kingdom of Urartu was filled with prosperity and art. The Urartian people steadily traded horses and were some of the first horse riders instead of only using horses for chariots. At the height of its power, the kingdom of Urartu covered Armenia, Turkey, Iran, and Georgia, which was impressive because the Assyrian Empire was still conquering the known world. Sadly, in the late 8th century, the Assyrians returned to Urartu under Sargon II, and this time the kingdom fell to the Assyrian war machine. Yet the Urartian people were not gone. Even under heavy tribute, taxes paid to the government, they still brought their economy back, which sustained them until 590 BCE, when the Medes conquered Urartu after finishing off Assyria. The Medes, and then the Achaemenids, oppressed the people, starting Armenia's long history of oppression and conquest. Urartu's rich culture and economy were stripped away, as their oppressors demanded taxes, namely in the form of horses, to aid conquering armies. The Armenians were soon impoverished and forced to live a semi-nomadic lifestyle to make ends meet. They even lost their ancient religion gradually, conforming to Zoroastrianism, the faith of the Achaemenid Empire. Although they did rebel in the Great Satraps' Revolt, even their local rulers could not free them from the burdensome weight of oppression. In 330 BCE, after Alexander the Great conquered Persia, the satrapy of Armenia became independent. The Orontid dynasty continued to rule, albeit with a short break. Armenia was finally free to heal from centuries of oppression and rebuild its cities and culture, but this freedom did not last long. About 150 years later, the Seleucid Empire rolled through on its way to Rome, setting up Xeriadris and Artaxias as the new rulers, splitting Armenia into two states. When Rome defeated the Seleucid Empire, Artaxias, who ruled the main kingdom, took advantage of the situation, declared independence, and began expanding Armenian borders again. He was one of the great Armenian kings and set up the Artaxiad dynasty to rule the flourishing kingdom. One of Armenia's greatest kings took the throne in 95 BCE. Although the Parthians thought they could control him, King Tigran II soon proved as worthy a conqueror as Alexander the Great. He reunited Armenia and then, in 91 BCE, attacked Parthia, regaining lost land. His army continued on. They were slow but almost unstoppable. Soon, the nations that once subjected the Armenians were under Armenian rule, including the remains of the Seleucid Empire. The Armenians were mighty conquerors, and Tigran grew the internal economy, determined that his people would finally thrive. The might of the Armenian Empire had finally come, and while it was a welcome balm for the people, it was not the end of their history. Instead, it was only a brief reprise from the tragedies that were to come. What happened to the Armenian Empire? Although Tigran was a great ruler, the Armenian Empire was short-lived. Armenia held territory in places like modern-day Turkey and Iran, and their expansion irritated the Roman Empire, which was fast becoming a powerhouse in its own right. Tigran's father-in-law, Mithridates VI of Pontus, started several conflicts with the Roman Empire, and by 75 BCE, he had dragged Tigran into the fight. Tigran tried to oppose the Romans, but the Romans beat him repeatedly. The only thing that saved him was the harsh winter. It would not save him forever, though, and when the Roman general Pompey marched into Armenia in 66 BCE, Tigran surrendered without much of a fight. The Armenian Empire was defeated, although King Tigran was allowed to keep his throne as a client king and live out the rest of his days peacefully. Sadly, this was not the beginning of a peaceful life for the rest of Armenia. It became a pawn in the battle between the Romans and the Parthians, both of which were great empires. Mark Antony captured and beheaded Artavasdes II on the charge of not providing enough troops to help in his campaign against Parthia. Once Parthia was tired of fighting with Rome, they left Armenia, but the Sassanids, descendants of the Persian Empire, soon conquered the land again. During the Sassanid Empire, Tiridates III persecuted Christians before St. Gregory the Illuminator converted it. However, he then began persecuting pagans, which did not fix the problem of religious persecution. Christianity became the main religion in Armenia by the end of the 4th century. But this did not stop the Sassanids and the Byzantine Empire from using Armenia as a pawn in their international relations, much as the Romans had. Many of the Armenians found Christianity appealing because the Sassanid conquerors were not, as it was a way to maintain their independence and keep up a small amount of resistance. The Sassanids saw this as a threat and tried to get rid of Christianity in Armenia and replace it with Zoroastrianism again. Even though the Sassanids were more robust than the Armenians militarily, the Armenians were tenacious and finally won their freedom of religion in 484 CE in the Navarsak Treaty. Armenia revolted a few times under Sassanid and Byzantine power and eventually freed itself from Sassanid rule with Byzantium's help. However, Armenia was soon beset by a new power, the Islamic forces. The Arabs tore through Armenia in the 7th century, leaving destruction and tragedy in their wake. Although the Armenians had been conquered before, they had never seen the ransacking that they experienced from the Arabs. Armenia remained fiercely independent through it all, but did not have independence for long. They were free in 885 CE to form the Bagratid dynasty, but around 160 years later, the Seljuk Turks attacked. Armenia eventually fell under Turkish control, where it would remain for several centuries. Then they fell victim to the Mongols, the Timurid Turkish forces, and then the Ottoman forces, who re-established Islam as the conquering religion in Armenia. All of these conquerors were brutal, and several seemed determined to wipe out the Armenians simply because they were different. The Ottoman Empire grew strong, conquering land from Egypt and Greece out to Romania and Arabia, and it used Armenia as a pawn in its fight with the Persians. The battling armies cared nothing for the people. They destroyed cities and slaughtered hundreds of thousands. By the 19th century, most Armenians had been displaced from their home. Their land was divided between the Ottomans and the Russians, and most Armenians lived throughout the Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans were Muslim and treated the Christian Armenians harshly, starting with taxes and ending with genocide. Why did the Armenians suffer the first modern genocide? Most people are familiar with the Holocaust, but sadly, few are familiar with the genocide of the Armenian people. By the end of the 19th century, the Ottoman Empire was declining, and Sultan Abdul Hamid II viewed Armenia as a threat to his empire, even though the people were generally peaceful. he convinced the Turkish people that the Armenians were dangerous. Several waves of massacres led up to the genocide. About 300,000 people died between 1894 and 1896, and another 30,000 died in 1909. However, as nations stood on the brink of World War I, the Ottomans decided that anyone who wasn't Turkish was a direct threat to the empire. The Ottomans declared war on Christians, which placed the Armenians directly in harm's way. The Armenian genocide began on April 24, 1915, and continued for 7 more years. At that time, hundreds of thousands of Armenians were forced from their homes and either forcibly deported or slaughtered, regardless of age, gender, or social class. The slaughter was cruel, gruesome, and merciless. Some Muslim citizens tried to save the Armenians. There were even stories of Muslim men marrying groups of Armenian women to keep them from the slaughter. But many turned their backs as the tragedies continued. By 1922, about 1.5 million Armenian people were dead, leaving only a quarter of the population that had been alive in 1915. It is a tragedy that leaves deep scars in a nation's history. The Armenians eventually became free from the Ottoman Empire. They fought back in the Battle of Sardarapat on May 28, 1918. That day is also celebrated as the beginning of the First Republic of Armenia. But this was only a tiny slice of Armenia. In October 1918, they absorbed Western Armenia as well, but the genocide against the Armenians did not end until 1922, when the Ottoman Empire finally collapsed. Sadly, the Armenian Republic did not last for long, soon coming under the power of both Turkey and the Soviet Union for a time. When the Soviet Union finally fell in 1991, Armenia was free for the first time in centuries. The Republic of Armenia is still working through the implications of its tragic history. Rebuilding a nation that has suffered for so long and in so many ways is complex, and they have not been free from tragedy since they started rebuilding. However, the Armenians are resilient and have so much to share with the world. They are ready to thrive in the modern age and look through their tragic history into a brighter, peaceful future. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. I hope you found this video to be captivating. To learn more about Armenia, check out our book, History of Armenia, a captivating guide to Armenian history starting from ancient Armenia to its declaration of sovereignty from the Soviet Union. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. Also, grab your free mythology bundle ebook while it's still available. All links are in the description. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.